This is an ABP Live Podcast.
What's up, guys? मेरा नाम है Nipun, and today on Behind the Wickets we have a very special guest with us. क्रिकेट को इंडिया में we all love a lot, लेकिन बहुत कम है who go into the depths like this man has gone to the depths of the game. And today I would like to welcome Mr. Richard H. Thomas, who loves cricket and has written this amazing book, Cricketing Lives, which I highly recommend reading if you're a fan of the game. Hi, sir. It's an honor to have you with us on the show.
Oh, it's
How
really
are
nice
you?
to be here. Thank you for your very warm welcome and your very kind words. That's very good of you.
How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Speaking to you from Cardiff, which is the capital city of Wales. And although I live in Cardiff, I actually work in Swansea University. And but the sun's out, which is quite rare for this time of year, but that's good.
That's great. That's great. So, what inspired you? I would just like to get right to it. What inspired you to write this book? How did you come up with it? Have you always been a big fan of the game, or did you develop this love for the game eventually?
Well, I suspect, Nipun, like many of the people who are listening, I developed my love of cricket through a sort of family hand-me-down, if you like. My dad was a very good cricketer, tipped for the top, actually, as a young man, but never sort of had the ambition to go all the way, but was the captain of the university cricket team for my university, where I'm very privileged to work, Swansea University, back in the early 1950s. So he's a very good cricketer himself. So he was sort of steeped in the game. And then when I came along in the early 1960s, very quickly, my earliest memories are, playing cricket in the back garden with my dad, and then a few years later with my brother. I think it was pretty clear to me and him, probably quite early on, I was never going to be a brilliant cricketer. My brother is a much better cricketer than I am. But I think for me to be sort of connected to the game in the way that I have been, it wasn't going to be because I was going to have a long and distinguished playing career. I think the way you can sum up my own cricketing career was once as a captain of our village cricket team. I was always captain of the seconds, and I asked somebody one year, why am I playing in the seconds? And they said, because we haven't got a thirds. So that sort of sums up my cricket career. But when I was quite a young kid, about maybe 8 or 9, maybe, my dad gave me a book, which is a book that he got when he was 21, actually, and he passed me down this book. I've got the book. It's very old and battered now.
Wow, that looks like an antique.
It is an antique, but it's called the Book of Cricket. So it's not the most imaginatively titled book, but inside the Book of Cricket is it's written by a man called Denzil Batchelor, who is a sort of sports journalist of the 1950s. And what that really gave me really was this real love that I've had ever since for the way that cricket is written about and reported. There are these fantastic pen portraits, really beautifully written by Denzil Batchelor, of players all the way back to the first one in the book is W.G. Grace, which in the British version of the book, he's on the cover, and obviously the book that you just held up, you've got Ranji on the cover of that one.
Right.
So Ranji's on. I really like that cover, by the way. I think
Yeah.
but W.G. Grace is on the cover, which is quite appropriate. But that really, for me, opened up my love of cricket writing, and I sort of dabbled in that for quite a long time, and I wrote quite a number of articles for a magazine called All Out Cricket, which was around for quite a while, and then latterly that's become Wisden, Cricket Monthly. So I've written for them for various things, and I've written these sort of pieces. And my dad always said to me, look, you need to you need to like write a book, put all these things together. And I always sort of, it's your dad. Your dad's going to like what you do, isn't he? You know,
Definitely, yeah.
they're sort of, they have to support you, your parents. So I thought, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy it, Dad. But I honestly don't think that these could make a book. And then one day out of the blue, an editor from Reaction Books, who are the people who published the book in the UK, just said, "Oh, I think you know, there's a book here if you want to join all of this stuff together." So I thought, well, okay, somebody who's an editor of a publishing company said that there's a book. So I sort of set about writing it. And then at that time, my dad had become quite ill. You know, my dad unfortunately had cancer, and you know, clearly wasn't going to be around for too much longer. So I had the incentive to try and finish it. So at least my dad could see that this was a project that had come to fruition.
That's beautiful.
And I managed to finish it in draft form not long before he dies, but I presented it to him in a big sort of folder that I'd printed out. It was really thick. And he was quite ill by that time. And I was imagining he would just say, yeah, you know, really, it's great. You know, I'm so proud that you did the book. And he said all of those things. But what he also did was he went through the whole book, checking for spelling mistakes and underlining little bits, saying, I'm not sure that happened. You need to check that fact. So I had a big long list of things that he sort of picked up. He never lived long enough, unfortunately, to see it actually published, but at least he got to see it. And I was very lucky, I suppose, that I got his input. You know, he was able to give feedback. So it was a nice sort of quite a poignant family story. And obviously when the book came out, I was amazed that people wanted to read it. I was amazed that people wanted to buy it. I was delighted that people should enjoy it. I've been very gratified and very humbled by a lot of the reviews that it's received. So ever since then, it's been sort of riding on the wave, I suppose.
Right. So I have actually read a few chapters. I haven't read the whole thing yet. And one thing that is very peculiar and very amazing actually is the depths that you have gone to in your research that you have done. Like from the early days, like from the how the game began actually, you have written all about that as well. So what was the process? How did you go so deep into it? Like how did you find the source material? What were the facts that you found hard to get by? How did your research part went? Because I think that would have been the hardest part of writing this book.
It certainly took a while, that's for sure. But I think the sort of the base knowledge was there because I'd spent so many hours reading this book and other books like it. So that sort of base knowledge was there. But one of the great benefits of being an academic is that you have access to lots of resources and databases and things like that. And there was a particularly good database called Nexus, which is a database of lots of university newspapers, articles, reports, magazines. So I was able to find a lot of source material there, but you can't quite see them in my office at home, but I've got bookshelves of books about cricket.
I can imagine the way you have written this is really amazing. So I can imagine you read a lot of books.
A lot of the stuff came from within this room because, you know, it's in a book somewhere. And obviously I've consumed a lot of reading about cricket over the years. And I think once you gain a reputation of someone who reads a lot about something, when anyone is having a clear out at home and thinking, I got all these books and some of them are about cricket, I know we'll have those, you know, so you quite often pick up things from friends and acquaintances along the way, you know.
For sure. Yeah. So that's great. So I would like to talk about the book a little bit more because since I'm from India, so I would like to know some of the chapters that you write about. One of them in particular, which a little bit hurt me as well, was for when you were writing about the '83 World Cup, there was a line written like the Indian cricket, you can say, got hit because Sir Vivian Richards had a mistimed shot. And that is the revolution that began after that in India. You know, that mistimed shot began everything. Well, I disagree a little bit with you because India beat West Indies twice in that tournament. So mistimed shot. So I think it was a lot of talent in that team as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair point. I think the key point of that 1983 victory for India was that it was fairly unexpected that India were going to win that.
Yeah.
I remember the first World Cup very clearly, 1975, obviously won by the West Indies with that fantastic innings by Clive Lloyd in the final, and Australia actually not getting, not being far away. And do you remember the sort of frantic scenes at the end with the crowd running on the pitch and all that?
Yeah.
And no one was quite sure if the match was over or not. But in that tournament, which is really the significant point that I wanted to make, I remember in one of the early games there was a game that England played against India, and England did something that was incredibly unusual in those days, which is they scored over 300 in a one-day match. And they got it. It was 60 overs in those days, but they made over 300. And in response, India, who had a good side, they had some good players. They had some of the best players. Gavaskar was playing, obviously. Bisham Bedi,
Yeah.
a number of others were in that side at the time, and they really sort of were a bit clueless in terms of how to go about that chase. And Gavaskar was sort of roundly castigated, wasn't he, for sort of ending up with 36 not out or something. And it was clear that one-day cricket, the strategizing for one-day cricket, and obviously hadn't quite sort of gelled within an Indian context. So if you think within 8 years of that happening, they won the World Cup. I mean, it's an astonishing turnaround. So yeah, I would accept your point that there was a lot more to it than Viv Richards mistiming the catch. Because,
Yeah, definitely.
But I think they were very unfancied. I mean, if you look at their bowling attack in that game, it was. Yeah, I think somebody rather unkindly described them as dibbly dobblers, didn't they? The Indian bowlers, but they were dibbly dobbly bowlers that put the ball on the spot and did the job. And
right.
and
At the end, I think that is what matters. Amarnath Singh would definitely disagree with you because he was fantastic in that final. So
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah.
he was, and I think if it wasn't for Kapil Dev in that tournament, I mean. Earlier in the tournament, he pulled off that amazing innings, hadn't he, against
world record
against Zimbabwe, where India were well dead and buried, but he came back and scored an amazing 100. So yeah, I know there's a lot more to it than Viv Richards' timing, but I think that was a turning point in Indian cricket, wasn't it? Because I think I mentioned in the book that. Not even the sort of Indian Cricket Board officials who came to watch were kind of expecting anything. I think they didn't even take their full allocation of tickets. There was lots of information about how fans back in India didn't even know that the tournament was on because it was so level. I mean, if you think that was 40 years ago this year, I mean, the world has changed a lot in 4 decades, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think now Indian cricket, I'm sure you can. I know England still battered us in the semi-finals this time. You are lucky in that. But yeah, I think Indian cricket has come far. We still have a way to go. But I think now we are out of the top contenders and teams do fear us a little bit. You have to agree with that. So yeah, definitely. Talking about the early history of Indian cricket, you did mention that you came to India and met Tiger Patoli when you came.
did. I wasn't in India. I was actually in Lords when I met him.
Right.
I'm trying to think back when it was. I do mention it in the book, and I've been looking back. I became an MCC member in 2005, which is the year that England won the Ashes. So obviously, I was very pleased to be able to watch cricket in Lords from the long room, with all the other members. So it was a great privilege to be able to do that. And I'm pretty sure it was in 2006 when Pakistan were on tour in England. And I think in that particular match that I was there watching, I think it was Alistair Cook's first 100 in the UK. He'd already scored 100 in India, but this was his first one at home. And I was sitting in the long room, as quite often happens. You're just sitting watching the cricket. You find yourself sitting next to somebody, and you just chat about the game. And I realised that the person I was sitting besides and chatting to was a guy called Shahriar Khan, who was a former president of the Pakistan Cricket Board, also a government minister, actually. And I remember him, being on the television. I remember him being quoted quite, he's quite a big character in world cricket. And I was chatting. He's a very nice man, chatting to him about the game. We were just passing the time of day. And then this figure walked towards us. We were just sitting together, and this figure walked over. And I knew exactly who it was. It was Tiger Pataudi. Now, Tiger Pataudi, to me, had been, well, he's an amazing man, isn't he? I mean, if you look at what he achieved in his life, he was an incredible, a very interesting history. His father, of course, played Test cricket for both India and England. But played 3 Test matches for each. His father also scored 100 in the Bodyline series for England in 32-33. So, an amazing sportsman himself. And his son, Tiger Pataudi, or now Abu Pataudi, Tiger Pataudi Jr., lots of different names. So, a man who played for Sussex in the early 60s and lost the use of an eye after a very serious car accident. And you would think for most sportsmen, losing your vision, or 50% of your vision like that, would be the end of your aspirations for sport, any type of sport. But this man somehow, within 6 months, was playing Test cricket for India, went on to captain India, went on to have an average, if you consider that he was playing with one eye, was very respectable in the late 30s. But someone also, when you read up about him, was incredibly popular with the people that he played with and against. But I think the thing that made the biggest impression on me is, when you meet some people and they just seem to have this aura of charisma around them. It's almost like they glow when they walk towards you. Definitely. Well, that was exactly what I felt about him. And I think most people who know me would say that it's not very often that I'm stuck for anything to say, but I definitely was that day. I couldn't think of anything to say other than, hello, nice to meet you. And I very quickly thought, and I think I would have been very welcome to have stayed and chatted between the two of them, who I later found out they were cousins, these two. That's why they were sort of quite... So they were first cousins, obviously one Pakistan and one Indian, and obviously, had been separated through partition and so on. But obviously very friendly and very warm greeting between them. And I just sort of made my apologies and beetled off. But I thought, I'll never forget, how sometimes you meet people and you think, my goodness, that you can understand this word charisma. I mean, he was it,
Definitely.
So I suppose that was quite unusual, because in the book, obviously, I'm writing about people that I never met, that I've only read about or watched or listened to. But this was somebody that I'd actually got to kind of shake hands with. So that was quite a thrill for me.
So it was kind of a fan moment. You can say it turned into kind of a fan moment, right?
I was a complete fanboy that day. I was totally starstruck. I'm very, very happy to admit it.
Brilliant, actually. So have you been to India? Have you been to a great nation ever?
I never have. It's definitely on my list. I hope one day perhaps to come to tour, actually. I have been to a few places around the world to watch cricket. I mean, I suppose the most interesting place to watch cricket, which is also the most recent place that I went to just before Christmas, I went with a group from our university, Swansea. I went to Florida to watch cricket in the US. And I thought, my goodness, this is not a natural home for cricket. And yet, in Sarasota Cricket Club, where we had a wonderful welcome, by the way, a really interesting multicultural mix. Lots of Indians, Pakistanis, other Asians, some Americans, some British, all have kind of formed this wonderful sort of multicultural cricket community. And our good friend Dusty, who's Indian, is the chairman of the club, and it was a wonderful time. I had to pinch myself. I was asked over there to speak about the book at a dinner by one of our alumni, Sal Lalani, and who's also affiliated to the club. And I had to keep pinching myself. Here I am in America watching cricket, but it was the most wonderful experience.
Exactly. I'm also very surprised. Like Florida, you said Florida. I was expecting Australia, maybe New Zealand or someplace like that. Florida is like out of the chapter here. So
it was a wonderful time, and we were treated wonderfully well. We were the recipients of wonderful hospitality. And the other place I've been, I have been to Australia. I went back in the early 90s, and I remember watching a one-day international between West Indies and Australia at the Gabba, actually, which is quite a thrill.
Right.
But I probably haven't watched cricket in as many places as I would have liked. But I think I definitely would love to come to India to watch cricket. I have to say, I do watch the IPL. I do see the IPL as an exciting part of cricket. I think it's really revitalized cricket globally. And I do watch those games, and I think I would love to go to an IPL game. I have to say that's what I really want to do.
IPL, yeah, definitely, that's amazing. But I would suggest that if you come to India, which is unlikely that match will happen that I'm about to suggest you, India versus Pakistan, anywhere in the world, I really suggest that you go and watch it, because that is just has another vibe and another atmosphere to any other stadium. I promise you, you won't regret it for sure. So if you do come to India, then I will suggest Eden Gardens, Kolkata. Beautiful.
I would imagine it's difficult to get a ticket for India against Pakistan.
Yeah, but I'm sure you can manage that. I'm pretty sure about that. You must have people who can help you with that for sure. So, like you talked about IPL, you know the history of the game so well. The game has evolved a lot over the years, and you have mentioned all of that in this wonderful book. According to you, like there have been some dark chapters and dark times ahead as well that you have mentioned in that as well. Do you think that somewhere with the money coming into the play and everything that has changed or evolved in the game, has the cricket lost its spirit a little bit in the evolution stage?
I don't think that it's lost its spirit. I think that's definitely still there. I think going back to that, I mean, obviously India are a powerhouse of world cricket now. You know, they're an epicenter of everything that goes on. And I think, you know, not to keep banging on about 1983, but I mean, that's when that sort of started, wasn't it, really? And I think what the IPL has done, because, you know, even though there's lots of T20 tournaments around the world, none is as glitzy and as big and as well supported as the IPL, because it's the original, isn't it? I think that what the IPL has done, it's really glamorized cricket, isn't it? It's made superstars out of lots of people. I think some people are so good, some players are so good. Maybe Kohli would be a good example, that they were going to be superstars with or without the IPL. But I think it's promoted players from all over the world into that sort of superstar bracket. I think the challenge, and I think that's a good thing, I think the challenge cricket has got right now is that there are so many formats. There are only 12 months in a year and 365 days in a year. And obviously it's very seasonal. You can only play cricket in the summer, or, you know, when the weather is allowing you to do that, whatever part of the world you're in. And I think there are too many formats for cricket. I think that the ones that perhaps there'll be some sort of shakedown that probably needs to happen, and it probably won't happen at the same time in all of the cricket playing nations. But I think we're probably heading that way, certainly in the UK, because we just don't have enough calendar space for all of the different formats that we have. So I think IPL, T20 cricket in whatever form is obviously here to stay because it's so important financially, isn't it? I think
Definitely.
one of the things that perhaps England have really helped along in the last few months with so-called, I don't think it's a great name, but Bazball, as everybody calls it.
Yeah.
But there's this incredibly attacking, assertive, ambitious, really exciting brand of cricket where you
Fearless, yeah.
yeah, I mean that's a really good way of putting it. Fearless. You understand that in order to win, you've got to risk losing. I think, but I think always to go for the win. I think that's really invigorated and secured Test cricket as as something that we have to keep. We certainly have to keep that because that's where you learn your skills, isn't it? Over those 5 days. I think it's the stuff in the middle. I know there's work going on in the UK, for example, about our county championship, and there's talk which has been resisted about losing some of that, and I don't see that as dispensable either. I think the thing that's probably going to be a problem is going to be the sort of longer form of the one-day cricket, the sort of 40, 50, 60 over stuff. That I think is probably under a little bit more pressure. It's probably a bit more vulnerable, but I think cricket is in a good state. I think many more people are watching it now than probably have done in its history. Certainly, I know I talk about some of those games, particularly in Australia and India as well, where the huge stadiums are full up. But obviously, what we have now is this global 24-hour television audience as well. So many people are watching cricket. There's so much interest in cricket. I think I was sort of reflecting when I was just sort of thinking about what we'd be talking about today, and I was thinking about my first memories of India, really, of India playing cricket, and that was in 1971 when India toured England. And in those days, obviously one-day cricket was hadn't really been invented yet, or was just about to be invented. So it was just about test matches. And in those days, India, in 1971 anyway, India and Pakistan shared a 6 series. So we had 3 tests with India, 3 tests with Pakistan. And I remember back then, because we didn't have the one-day cricket, we didn't have as much test cricket. A touring side coming to the UK was so much more of an event than it probably is now. Because a touring side would come, they would play the counties, they would play warm-up games, you would get a chance to see them playing near to where you lived. You could see these brilliant world stars, playing your team locally. I think there's so much cricket now. I mean, I'm probably like you, Nipun, I've got subscriptions to all of these sports channels and things. I mean, at every day there's a cricket match going on somewhere. And I think what there needs to be is probably a bit less cricket, I think, because to make the cricket more special. There's so much of it now, isn't there? I think one of the other great developments within cricket, and I always think of my dad in particular about this, was women's cricket. And obviously that's really important to you folks in India, as it is for us in the UK and people like Australia as well, of course. But obviously women's cricket has just proliferated the amount of cricket even more. But I think it's fantastic the way that women's cricket has taken off. And I mean, my dad in particular, my dad loved women's cricket. My dad was a massive women's cricket fan. And if you asked him who his favourite player was, he would say without a moment of hesitation, Sarah Taylor. She was England women's wicketkeeper. He thought she was absolutely out of this world. And I think what was significant about Sarah Taylor, of course, is that she was described by Adam Gilchrist, no bad wicketkeeper himself, of course, at the time, as being the best wicketkeeper in the world, man or woman.
Yeah.
When you've got that sort of level of equality being recognised, I think women's cricket to me is just as exciting as men's cricket, and I'm very pleased, and I think, well, one thing that needs to be perhaps more of is women's cricket, perhaps a bit less men's cricket. Maybe that would be an interesting solution.
That is why I actually raised my eyebrow when you said there needs to be less cricket. I don't see that happening at all because I really think that women's cricket is growing. So there will be more formats for them, maybe a women's Premier League. I'm not sure. That could be the way to go in the future. So it's a high possibility. So I don't see cricket declining in terms of games. But yeah, definitely.
I think it does. I think I would like to see it get that special feeling back. You know, the special feeling that I used to experience as a kid when you knew there was a touring team coming and you knew they'd be here for a while. I think touring teams now, they fly in, they play some test matches, they play some one days and they've gone again, you know, because they've got to go somewhere else. And I think those days where you actually get to see your heroes and your stars playing locally or playing in a kind of county game
that
down
made
the road,
it special.
I made it special because you had that sort of connection with them.
Connection, yeah.
Probably, unless you had a ticket to go watch a test match or a one, you would never get that close connection with them now, would you? Yeah.
Definitely. Before I go, I would like to ask you one thing. Who's your favorite? What is your favorite cricket moment? Your favorite cricketer, and what has been your best experience writing this book? What is the one anecdote that you would take out of this that would like stood out for you while writing this book?
I guess I've probably already talked about my favorite, my proudest cricket moment, I think, would probably be meeting Tiger Pataudi. I think that probably would be the thing that sort of filled me up with kind of pride and excitement, maybe. I think close to that would be the first time that I walked into the Lord's Long Room as a member of the MCC. That was a wonderful moment for me as well. I think my favorite cricketer that I wrote about, perhaps there's a chapter that's almost entirely devoted to him, and his name was Lionel Tennyson. He was a captain of England back in the early 20s, but he was someone who, let's say, enjoyed life on and off the pitch. And maybe I shouldn't say too much more about him than that, but perhaps that would be a little bit of an inspiration for someone to read the book and find out a bit more about him. So he would be Lionel Tennyson. And I suppose my favorite part of writing the book really was, I suppose, that taking, when my dad was pretty ill and he was in his nursing home, was taking in that big box file and saying, right, Dad, there it is. I've done it. I finished the book. What do you think? And his sort of joy, really, that he got from seeing that project that sort of was his idea, really, had sort of come to some sort of fruition.
Well, that's great. And I'm sure he's smiling. He didn't get to watch you publish this book, but I'm sure he's smiling from heaven above. I'm pretty sure about that. And this is actually great. I will be reading the whole book after this. And it was great having you with us. And I hope I hope you write another book and we can have another interview with you soon.
It's been lovely to meet you, Nipun. And maybe I'll when I come to India, I'll be asking you for a ticket for India versus Pakistan.
You got it. It's on me, for sure. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.